Okay, so it's an indie roguelike survival game. Oh, come on, wait, no, come back. Look, I get it. Games like this are a dime a dozen, but The Flame in the Flood is really good, I promise. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I really like the idea of survival games in theory, but then as soon as I actually get my hands on one, it's always something like... Fucking god damn it. And maybe it's just I have the attention span of a coked up toddler, but every time I try one of these things I always get burnt out after a few hours. It's always the same routine. You gather wood, loot some shit, find some food, and then you just sort of exist for a while until you die of scurvy or something. And I mean, that's pretty much what I'm doing right now, minus the scurvy thing. Or maybe not. Maybe I die from scurvy, who knows? Maybe that's just how I go. What I'm trying to say is, 9 times out of 10, these games feel less like surviving and more like subsisting. See, games are typically at their most interesting when people are being forced to take risks. The issue is that people tend to naturally gravitate towards the most effective way of playing a game rather than the most enjoyable. And I find survival games are, generally speaking, pretty bad at forcing the player into risky situations. Like, once you set up a little shelter and have some food stockpiled, that's pretty much all there is to it. And then you get bored, and the nihilistic panic starts to set in, and you have to face the crippling realization that you're a horrible person who hurts people for no reason other than to prove to yourself that you can have even a small effect on people's lives, and that anyone who thinks they care about you only feels that way because you've manipulated them into doing so. Huh. Maybe I'm the problem. Nah, it's gotta be video games' fault, right? I mean, it's not just survival games that suffer from this issue. In RPGs, you'll pretty much always experience more success in the long run if you just stick around one area and grind low-level enemies for a while and then, oh my god, you beat the game! I'm telling you, the absolute best way to play a Pokemon game, and trust me, I know me a little something about Pokemon, is with the self-imposed Nuzlocke challenge, where you can't choose your team and if a Pokemon faints you have to release it. But that involves the player taking the mechanics into their own hands. So, what can developers do to help force a certain playstyle and try and ensure that the player has the most interesting time with their game, and not just the most efficient? Well, in Doom 2016, the designers felt the game was at its best when the player was being aggressive and moving about. So, id Software added the glory kill mechanic, which gave you plenty of reason to get up close to the bad guys and explode their heads with your bare hands. You know, the way Jesus would have wanted it. They also made sure all the enemies' ranged attacks were projectile-based and not hit-scan, so the player would always have an opportunity to maneuver around oncoming fire, instead of feeling the need to stay behind cover like a little bitch. Let me see what else. Oh, in the Swindle, there's a 100-day time limit, so you have to take risks and go for the big heists, and not just commit fucking petty theft every level and then bounce.
Fuck this shit, I'm out.
Bloodborne lets you take some health back if you're after just taking some damage, which encourages a more aggressive playstyle. Frostpunk forces you to make harsh decisions by giving you a deadline to stock up for this big, massive fuck-off storm, so you could be pressured into signing things like child labour laws and... Wait, what am I talking about?
The Flame in the Flood.
Right, The Flame in the Flood, thank you. Jesus, I'm bad at this. So, how does The Flame in the Flood manage to keep things interesting? Well, the first thing it does... Oh, fucking Christ, what is that? Jesus, she looks like Tim Burton's taint. Nah, we're gonna have to do something about that. Can we throw in something a little more aesthetic? Ah, perfection. So the first thing it does is sets a clear goal. Follow the radio signal. Like, right off the bat, you feel like you're working towards something. You're also given plenty of short-term goals, like build these tools or collect these items, which offer smaller, more immediate rewards on the way to your long-term objective. Basically, this all adds to a sense of purpose, so you're not just picking flowers and kicking rocks and having to face the reality that you only ever cause problems for anyone naive enough to let you into their lives and that everyone hates you and they're not wrong to feel that way and you're too much of a coward to...
Dude.
Right, yeah, no, video games, sorry. Man, this is a weird episode, huh? So the gameplay is also split into 2 separate parts. This really helps with the pacing of the game. You're always either having a leisurely paddle down the lazy river, or enjoying a relaxing hike and admiring the scenery.
Oh god, no!
So you're never doing the same one thing for too long, which keeps things from getting stale. Now, no one area is ever going to have enough resources to support you for too long, so you're constantly on the go. The closest thing you have to a home base in this game is your raft, and that doesn't really offer much other than a little bit more storage. Not until you upgrade the shit out of it later anyway, but whatever. Point being, you never get too comfortable to call anywhere home. It also means that if you're running around on a little adventure and something like this happens... Oh Christ, she looks like Sally the Ragdoll sanitary pad. You can't just waddle home to your mountain of supplies and lick your wounds. You gotta deal with shit as it comes. You also have this tiny inventory, so you gotta travel light, which makes it pretty much impossible to be prepared for everything. And you can't just be like, oh, I'll go back to that area from 5 minutes ago with all the medicine and shit I didn't need until now, because the river's current is too strong, so you're forced to keep moving forward into the unknown. And even if you are forsaken by the RNG gods, this good boy will take what was ever in his backpack and hang on to it for the next playthrough, so it wasn't a total waste of time. So, the story mode is split into these 10 different regions, which get colder and colder the farther downstream you go. So if you're not dressed to deal with the harsher environments, you'll freeze to death. Basically, this stops you from making a beeline to the end of the game and forces you to stop and gather supplies, which is where most of the interesting shit happens. And that's not to say the sailing is boring. This game is always trying to kill you in one way or another. And yeah, like in all survival games, you'll eventually reach the point where you're effectively self-sustaining. You'll upgrade your raft with spinning rims and a personal maid, increase your carrying capacity to rival that of Mary Poppins, and have so much supplies that Israel is starting to look at you funny. But instead of this being the point where you'd lose interest, the Flame of the Flood treats this as the final key to beating the game. See, the folks at Molasses Flood knew there's actually a lot of fun to be had in optimising the system, just not so much once the system is actually optimised. So once you have enough steak in your fanny pack to last the journey, you can just keep sailing and go on to see what that radio signal leads to, if anything. And the last few regions are so barren, you'll actually have a tough time surviving if you didn't reach the point of making the game redundant beforehand. They're mostly just there to host optional challenges. Plus, it feels really satisfying to be able to stay on the go and not have to stop for supplies anymore. Now, look, the game's not perfect. The menus are a bit fiddly, it has the tendency to bug out from time to time, and the game's strengths only really shine through if you're playing on the story mode's hardest difficulty. Overall, it's a little rough around the edges, but the whole thing is just so damn charming. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying all survival games are bad or anything like that. What I am saying is that the Flame of the Flood is the only one to have a multiverse travelling dog sidekick. Who's a good boy? Who's a good... Oh, wait, no, hang on. Yep, you can't pet your dog. This game fucking sucks. Oh well, you win some, you lose some. Anyway, that's about it for today. So be sure to join us next time when our topic will be why Skyward Sword is secretly the best Zelda. Ugh, that's a tough sell.
It's been 1 week since you looked at me.